He was president-elect of the Oxford Union, but then George Abaraonye appeared to celebrate the killing of Charlie Kirk.
Why did he say what he said that day? Does he regret it? Has he apologised to Charlie Kirk's widow? And is he also a victim when it comes to cancel culture?
I think you just need to say, for the sake of absolute clarity, that was a bloody awful thing I did, and I should never have done it, and I'm so sorry.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've said it before. I can say it again.
I know, but you say it too well, George.
Sorry.
You say it in too Oxford a way.
Sorry.
It sounds like you do all this sort of thing. It's about internet discourse, and I didn't know the context. No, and I want to repeat. I've said many terrible things. I don't want anyone to go through my internet history.
Yeah.
If I've ever said those things, it was just an awful thing to do.
You made a mistake.
Yeah, I made a mistake. I've been very clear about this quite consistently. I made a mistake. It was, like you said, shitty thing to say. I shouldn't have reacted like that. I should have just been better.
Yeah.
On September the 10th, Charlie Kirk was shot and killed in Utah. Kirk was the founder of Turning Point USA, an organisation that travels the world, sparking debates in universities. Meanwhile, George Abaraonye, who joins us on today's Daily Tea, was the president-elect of the Oxford Union. When Kirk was killed, you wrote a WhatsApp, George, saying, and I quote, "Charlie Kirk got shot, let's effing go," while on Instagram you posted, "Charlie Kirk got shot, LOOOL." Why did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of saw the notification, and I guess I didn't have a lot of context for what happened. At the time, there wasn't a lot of information regarding the event. There wasn't, the video hadn't surfaced yet. So there was very little context, very little information, I guess, as to what happened. And I guess such is the nature of things you see online, things you see on the internet, and especially I think large-scale political events that happen on the internet now, a lot of them are trivialized. And I think I kind of fell into that as well in not realizing the gravity of the situation, not realizing the severity of the situation. And so I reacted, callously, and it was insensitive and not really befitting of the moment at all. And, part of it was to elicit a reaction, to kind of have a discussion, not even necessarily about the event, but more so just about, Mr. Kirk, his political legacy. And I guess I went about that in completely the wrong way. And I realized that as well kind of quite quickly in that, seeing the reaction I received kind of in the group chat, and, there was discussion about whether that was the appropriate way to talk about, an event like this, and also just an appropriate way to go about sparking the conversation I wanted to have. And then, a bit more information surfaced online, and I started realizing actually, okay, this could be really serious, and I realized I'd miscalculated, and so I kind of deleted and
Had you
apologized.
Not seen the video at that point?
I
only query that because it almost happened, the horrific thing about this assassination is it almost happened in real time. I got home and I had it on, and inadvertently I showed my son, which I regretted a bit. He's 15 and he's probably seen worse, but it was just so visceral and horrifying. And that WhatsApp group, who was in that? Was it just fellow students or mates?
Yeah, it was students, some union members, and it was a group chat that had been used a lot for kind of political discussion. At one point we'd actually talked about kind of why Mr. Kirk had been invited to the Oxford Union. There'd been discussion about whether debating someone like Mr. Kirk is actually a productive thing to do, and I'd advocated for him, saying kind of, while he's someone I disagree with, on many different positions, and someone who I would engage with in debate, someone who I did engage with in debate, I thought someone like Charlie Kirk needs to be challenged, through the appropriate channels, through the appropriate forums. I thought this is someone who's built his kind of platform on debate and engaged with debate, and so should be engaged with in debate. But kind of going back to what you said, I think it's interesting. You said, you think your 15-year-old might have seen worse, and I think that kind of is part of the problem with, I guess, just things that happen online, and not just things that happen online, but kind of the way in which these large-scale events are disseminated through the internet. In that kind of, it's true, it was very quick, and it happened over a very short period of time. I guess I'm not going to say unfortunate, but I quite literally reacted with very little context in the paper, perhaps 15, 20 minutes before kind of any real information had surfaced.
So you didn't know he was dead yet?
I had no clue he was dead.
You just had heard that he'd been shot.
Yes, and that there was a shooting at the
And you
event.
wanted to have a conversation. Is that what you meant by let's effing go? Is that the trigger to now let's discuss it?
I don't think it's the appropriate trigger. I don't think it's the right way.
But is that what you meant? Were you because I'm trying to understand, Charlie Kirk got shot, let's effing go. I mean, when I first hear that, it sounds like let's kick off. either let's party or this is the way forward. I mean, but that was a cue to people to discuss the shooting.
It's not necessarily that was, me saying, oh, great thing that's happened here, wow, like this is something that should happen more or anything like that. I think it was more so just almost just in the moment, almost just a kind of blur of, emotions and various different shock and kind of just almost word what's the word? Kind of you just react in the moment. And I guess I realized obviously it wasn't befitting of the moment because I deleted everything. I kind of apologized on my social medias before any of the news cycle, before any of the press storm. I think and
that's good, but if I may as well,
no, of course.
You said that on WhatsApp, but you then also went on to Instagram to say Charlie Kirk got shot, lol. Well, that's not just let's have a conversation about it. That really implies that you thought it was funny that a man had just got shot. Regardless of whether he was dead or not, it's not funny that a man just got shot.
Well, this I agree with, and I think partly like I said, it was almost a symptom of the kind of trivialization that happens with these events online. I think, again, at the time, with little context, with no kind of information about it, it was almost something that didn't really feel real, something that didn't really kind of exist yet, something that you couldn't really come to terms with exactly. And I think, it's not almost that I found the situation funny, because obviously with hindsight, I can be like, that wasn't funny at all. Obviously in the moment even, I kind of realized after posting, it's probably not the way I should have been acting or the way I should have reacted. But I think part of that reaction was also, and I don't want to sound cruel or crude here, so I guess please forgive me in any capacity, but almost an irony in that Mr. Kirk is someone who, consistently advocated for the right to bear arms. He's someone who, at one point said that gun deaths were a prudent deal, for the right to bear arms, for the right to the Second Amendment. And I thought, this is someone who has consistently advocated for gun reform and yet has become almost a victim of his own policy, a victim of his own rhetoric.
Well, you can advocate gun reform, but not advocate
shooting
political assassinations.
Well, of course.
Yes. I mean, he would say guns are for self-defense. He wouldn't say they're for killing people.
I'm sort of conscious of the dynamic of this, looking a little bit like we're your mum and dad questioning you about some bad behaviour that occurred at school. So, forgive that. But what I'm interested in really is the motivation. And I would suspect, and to be fair, my suspicions were confirmed by a statement you later gave to the New Statesman about it. But this is my interpretation of what you said. You're basically saying, he's a righty, I don't agree with what he's saying, I don't think it's much of a loss to society that he's died, I'm on the left, so come on, fellow lefties, let's revel in the demise of this bloke that we just really feel is a racist and a bigot. Because you told the New Statesman afterwards, my words were no less insensitive than his, arguably less so. The difference is that I had the humility to recognise when I strayed from my core values, and I addressed it immediately upon reflection. So you're saying that because he came out with ideology that you disagreed with, it's no less insensitive for you to revel in his murder?
Okay, well, there are a couple of ideas I'd like to tackle there. Firstly, I don't think this is kind of a left-right issue, and more so, I'm not happy at all about the man's death. I don't believe that he should have died in that capacity. I don't believe anyone should be shot for their political opinions. And actually, for as much as I disagreed with him, I also engaged with him in debate. So this idea that I guess I was happy that he's gone, or I'm happy that, that happened to him, is untrue. I can disagree with someone and still engage with them respectfully and engage with their ideas respectfully. And I guess almost to contextualize that comment, when we talk about, Mr. Kirk, he, in saying my words were no less sensitive, Mr. Kirk is someone who, at various different points has called for the repealing of the Civil Rights Act 1964, which is something that, for context, enshrines in law the right of people to not be discriminated against based on their race. So this is not someone who, just had opinions about the world. This is someone who, if he had his way, would have enacted policy and platforms that would have done real harm to people that look like me. They would have done real harm to people in my community. They would have done real harm to people like black people globally. This is someone who, at various different points, trivialized and laughed at the deaths of women and children in Gaza because he believed that Hamas justified the civilian deaths in Gaza. So this is not someone who just had opinions, and this is not just someone who I disagreed with. And we can still separate the fact that, I disagreed with him, sure, and I debated with him, and I engaged with him in that discussion. And he is someone who I disagreed with on many different points, on many different platforms, and is someone that should be engaged with in that capacity, and still doesn't deserve to die, and still didn't deserve to be shot. And I've made that clear when I've spoken out, that he didn't deserve to die, that he didn't deserve to be shot like that no one deserves to be shot or deserves to be a victim of political violence for the political opinions they hold. And I think we don't need to conflate the two when we talk about it, because I don't think it's productive, in that there is a real conversation to be had around the legacy of someone like Mr. Kirk and the impact that these right-wing provocateurs have in the space of political discourse. When we look at kind of the increased polarization of political discourse, and we look at the environments that they add to when they stoke rhetoric of division.
Well, sorry, do you understand that left-wing zealots also stoke division?
Of course, and again, I'm not trying to say that it's a specifically left or right issue. In fact, more so, I think it's just an issue of online discourse in general, in that there is an unwillingness almost, I think, to reach across the aisle oftentimes, and instead there is a speed to provoke, and there is a speed with which in that provocation comes polarization. And I think it's part of the trap I fell into in the way I reacted, in the way in which I sought not almost to empathize or to have, a real nuanced discussion, but more so to provoke a reaction, I guess, in the way I kind of commented. And then from that reaction to then go into whatever conversation I wanted to have. And that's not the right way to do things. And I can reflect on that, I can realize that even in the moment, again, I reflect and I realize that, which is why I deleted everything before all the news, before kind of the press storm, because even in that moment, I kind of realized soon afterwards, actually, I'm completely going about this in the wrong way, and that I need to be better because, like I said, I'm someone who consistently has advocated for peaceful protest. I'm someone that, even when I reflected on my Instagram, talked about the need for empathy in our politics, and that, this increased polarization only adds to a climate of violence that leads to more events like this, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum. And so, again, part of this whole mistake and journey of growth after this has been about being able to engage with ideas, not on so much of a binary, but with the nuance that it deserves, and being able to engage with opinions and ideas that I disagree with, because I think that's healthy and that's how discussion is had in deliberative democracy.
When you did debate with him, how did you find him? I should explain. I should give context.
Of course.
He came to the Oxford Union, and he did what he used to do is he would stand up and he'd take questions from the audience. And it was generous in the sense that he would allow people to ask 2 or 3 things and to have some back and forth. And there's great footage of the two of you actually debating.
Yeah. So Mr. Kirk is someone who, like you said, built a career of going to universities, allowing people to kind of almost in an ask me anything style, kind of engage with people.
Prove me wrong, he used to say.
Prove me wrong, exactly. He also went to Cambridge, I think maybe two months prior, something like that. So he was someone that I kind of knew about. I knew of kind of his debate tactics. I knew of kind of the way in which he engages with debate, and the way in which also kind of oftentimes the debates that he does have become clipped and become kind of very public. So I kind of, at the beginning, kind of had an apprehension to debating him in that I was unsure to what end me engaging with him in discussion would bring, in that I disagreed with many of his ideas, and I thought, well, what's the point in engaging with someone who's just never going to agree with me on something? And I also thought, look, I'm just a student, I don't really want to kind of, open myself up to that kind of media scrutiny, that kind of massive attention, which since then...
Oh, hang on, you were president-elect of the Oxford Union. You were always going to get a degree of scrutiny with all of the high-profile guests you get in there.
Of course, but at the time I wasn't. At the time, I was simply just a member of the committee. I was just a member of the committee.
But you had ambitions on being president of that union.
Not really. At that point, no, I hadn't actually. I was there simply to help. One of my best friends was president at the time, and that's honest to God, part of why I was part of that committee. I'd actually taken kind of break from the Oxford Union the term before, because kind of it's a it's an environment that, you know, you can get very, very consumed in sometimes. So kind of, I was always apprehensive about the idea of engaging with Mr. Kirk in debate, just because I thought, kind of, to what end is it really productive? But I thought, I'm going to come to the event anyway. I know who the guy is. I'm interested in what he has to say. I'm interested in discussion that was being had. I remember at the time there was some interesting discussions being had around a mother in Atlanta who was in a coma and was still being forced to kind of give birth to a child. And I thought, you know, that was an interesting point of discussion maybe to touch on. I had also at the time been doing research around kind of the manosphere and kind of right-wing media spaces online. And so I was very interested in kind of how that impacts people's masculinity. Of course, adolescence has just come out. So I thought there were a lot of interesting points of discussion that might come up. So I go and I listen to Mr. Kirk, and I guess it was different to how his usual format is in that, you know, there was almost a Q&A session, an interview session at first between him and the president. And there were a couple points brought up, and I thought there were a couple points that I wanted to kind of tackle or rebut. And then he, you know, debated a couple other students first, and I thought he wasn't being rigorously challenged, at least not in the way that I thought potentially on certain issues I would have gone about talking to him or asking him questions. And so, you know, at that point I thought, well, this is the Oxford Union, it's a place for debate, it's a space to, you know, share your opinions, to speak your mind. Why can't I go and say something? You know, I think I have the capabilities and the facilities to debate him. And so I did. Which is, you know, much has been made of what I wore and kind of, you know, that I was just quite casually.
It has, and people leapt to saying things like, not just why were you president-elect, but why were you even at Oxford? Do you think that some of the reaction to your remarks ended up becoming coded about racism?
Well, of course, and I think we can be very clear about that, and I think it's almost bad faith to say it hasn't. You know, there's valid discussion to be had about, you know, the mistake I made and what I said, you know, as we've had here. But I think we can separate that completely from my race. We can separate that from the grades I got. We can separate that from, like, me as a person. And I think you almost discredit the actual conversation that can be had around kind of what I said when you link it to my race, when you link it to the grades I get. You discredit any good faith discussion that can be had as soon as you start to engage in that racism or that classism, because at that point, why am I going to engage with someone who doesn't even believe in my personhood or my dignity based on the color of my skin or the grades I got or the background I come from? So,
and I don't think Charlie Kirk was that kind of person, by the way.
Pardon?
I don't think Charlie Kirk would have made those sorts of judgments. I'm not saying you are saying he is, but I'm just making the point that the kind of conservatism that he embodied was meritocratic. He wouldn't have begun from a position of saying, I'm looking at you and I'm judging you shouldn't be here.
Well, do I think he would have said it to my face? No, I think he's obviously a very respectful person. He was very respectful in the debate I engaged with. But some of the positions he also held were ones that could be considered racist or are considered racist. Like I said, his thoughts around repealing the Civil Rights Act 1964, some of his commentary around, say, DEI policies, but more specifically when we talk about that, he was very vocally outspoken about kind of black pilots and saying, for example, that he would be concerned if he walked onto a plane and saw a black pilot because he'd think they're less qualified, which is just categorically untrue, and I think, you know, can only really be rooted and based in a level of racism and stereotype regarding kind of ideas that black people are somehow lesser or, you know, have like, you know, lower IQ or, you know, an inability to engage with, you know, these kind of high level concepts. So is Charlie Kirk someone that would have called me a slur? Maybe not, sure. But is Charlie Kirk also someone that I think at times engaged with racist ideas and engaged with racist policies? Yes. And I think, once again, that doesn't mean he should have died, doesn't mean he should have been shot. And we can have that discussion around kind of the impact of some of the policies he advocated for and separate that from his death.
Are you happy he's no longer on the circuit spouting ideas you don't agree with?
No, because I don't think the way in which he died was befitting of that, and I don't agree with the way in which he died, and I don't think he should have died like that.
Let me say, one of the ironies of this is people jumped upon an Oxford debate you did about justice and violence, and people watched it, and I felt that they didn't actually hear what you said. Yes. Because the whole point of your speech was you were repudiating the role of violence in political causes.
Exactly.
And if I may also add, I feel some of the reaction to you was racist.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've taught at Cambridge, have some idea of the standards of Oxbridge and what it expects. And I think people watching this should be able to judge that you're exactly the kind of person who should be at Oxford.
Thank you.
You clearly have the mind and the ability to articulate yourself that I don't know why there was any doubt as to whether you should have been there or not.
Yeah.
I also have some sympathy because I don't think there is any human being who hasn't thought terrible things about their opponents. And I remember some years ago when Ian Paisley died, I wrote a piece for this newspaper, which I now regret, in which I said I have no sympathy for him, and I more or less said I think he's probably in hell. I'm
Yes.
saying that as a Roman Catholic, because my people have experienced some degree of oppression on these islands too. I wouldn't say that now.
Yeah.
And this is the thing: is I wonder if you're too clever. That much of what you're saying is too cleverly structured. It was just a shitty thing that you did. And I think you just need to say, for the sake of absolute clarity, that was a bloody awful thing I did, and I should never have done it, and I'm so sorry.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've said it before. I can say it again. Like,
I know, but you say it too well, George.
Sorry.
You say it in too Oxford a way.
Sorry.
It sounds like you do all this sort of thing. It's about internet discourse, and I didn't know the context. No, and I want to repeat. I've said many terrible things. I don't want anyone to go through my internet history.
Yeah.
If I've ever said those things, it was just an awful thing to do.
You made a mistake.
Yeah, I made a mistake. I've been very clear about this quite consistently. I made a mistake. It was, like you said, shitty thing to say. I shouldn't have reacted like that. Like, I should have just been better.
Yeah.
What did you end up saying to Erica, his wife? Because I think you said you were going to apologise to his family, which would, I assume, include her. Have you had contact? What happened?
I haven't had direct contact. I wouldn't really know how to get into direct contact. But I mean, when the Times asked me, I said I would, of course, offer my apologies and my condolences. That I believe that no one should grow up no one should be widowed. No child should grow up fatherless. In circumstances that can be avoided. So, absolutely, I'd offer my apologies and condolences to the family.
You were forced to stand down as president-elect because of a no-confidence vote that was held by the Oxford Union. You're still there in your third year of studying PPE?
Yes.
How has it affected your life at university and career prospects, this furore?
Yeah, I mean, career prospects, I wouldn't really know to this point, and honestly, I'm not exactly thinking about it right now. I'm mostly just focused on my studies, finishing that, kind of also just getting through what has been quite a difficult time, of course. It was quite scary, I won't lie. Most people my age, most students, I think, don't expect, even if they, like you said, do shitty things or make a mistake, I guess don't expect to be under that much scrutiny. And that was quite difficult for me. And I think part of the scrutiny I've been able to engage with, and it's also made me a stronger and better person, I think. But also the other side of it is, like you said, a lot of what has been said online has also been quite racist, has been classist. People have called for my deportation, even though I'm born in London. People have called me a chimp in a suit, and like these are things that of course are difficult to overcome. And I think part of it is, I guess, tougher skin and being able to push through that. But undoubtedly, it's been quite difficult at times. I felt almost unsafe going back to Oxford, and I think the community there has been lovely and kind of welcoming me and embracing the fact that you made a mistake, but you're willing to learn from that. And so I've been a lot of this is about, I guess, trying to grow and move on in a way that is healthy, in a way that is productive going forward. And part of that will be obviously going back to studies, finishing my degree, ensuring that I apply myself to that fully.
This is a slightly left field question, but what you're saying in your experience of, as we're using this terminology, having done something shitty as a young man.
I'm sorry for introducing.
Well, I think
Lowered the
it's,
tone.
fair enough.
I could think of no
it's
other way of
actually
putting it.
reminded me of another story that's been in the headlines in recent weeks, and this is Nigel Farage's schoolboy behaviour in Dulwich College. Now, I wouldn't imagine for 1 minute, George, that you necessarily sympathise with the Reform UK leaders' views, but I would be really intrigued to know what you make of how he is being judged about what he said allegedly 49 years ago.
So I think there's an interesting distinction to be made in that, obviously, Mr. Farage allegedly said these things as a schoolboy, but instead of being able to either confirm or deny or take responsibility. He's looked to obfuscate. He's looked to justify in that oh well, there were other racist things being said on the BBC and jokes being made. It was just a product of the times. And sure, you can almost give him that. You can almost say fine, that it was a product of the times, like you said. I don't think it makes it right, and I think any morally upstanding person, I think, should just be able to come out and say, like I have done, I did a shitty thing, I said something stupid, and I'm better than that now. But instead, he's done the exact opposite at every single point in time. He's looked to obfuscate or
but hang on,
skirt responsibility.
I'm just talking about the original crime. Should we be found guilty as adults of the stupid stuff we say as children or young people? Because the argument would be, well, you're studying PPE at Oxford and you're over 18,
sure,
so you should have known better. And some of this language is the language of the time, isn't it?
Sure.
Effing let's go, Charlie Kirk got shot, LOL.
Sure.
It's so sort of 2025 type spiel that you might give.
Sure.
Not least if you're on the left and somebody on the right has been
in the same way that
gunned
Farage
down.
spoke in language, which was actually quite common
I
in
mean,
the 1970s.
I'm saying, I don't want to push you into a corner here.
Allegedly.
But you're going to be a bit two-faced if on one hand you're seeking forgiveness because you've now realised you should have done better and give me a chance. I'm only at the beginning of my university / whatever career, and then turn around and say, well, Farage at the age of 15 or whatever isn't deserving of the same sort of understanding.
Well, I think the difference here is I've apologised. I apologised consistently and quite publicly. I apologised before the press. I apologised when this became a story. I've continued to apologise. And Farage refuses to apologise. And I think there is a difference in that I've made an apology, and that outside of the apology in this one mistake, like you said, I've consistently advocated for peaceful politics. I've gone out of my way very often to talk about a need for empathy in my politics, whereas Farage refuses to apologise and has then made a career out of stoking division in his politics when he talks about mass deportations, when he talks about
well, with respect, Shabana Mahmood has been talking about mass deportations. Talking
doesn't-
about mass deportations is the sort of politics of the era, I'm afraid.
Well, but that's my
It is
point.
The
politics.
the LOL of its time.
It's the LOL of its
But
time.
I guess this is my point,
Yeah.
that the politics of the time is inherently divisive, and I don't
Yes.
think
I
that's
know.
productive. And I think
But I merely want to balance the conversation out by saying,
No, of course.
on left and right. Zara Sultana's language is divisive. Some of the people that have come and spoken at the Oxford Union, on one occasion driving a Jewish man out of the chamber, is divisive. Students turning up with red paint on their hands, jazz handing in the face of the slaughter of Israelis, is frankly deeply offensive. Nobody on this debate, this is one thing I object to, George, because we're having a really nice discussion here. And I think, funny enough, although we disagree on many things, we're all getting along quite well. Can we not just do this thing of saying that only the right is divisive? This
I'm
stuff gets stoked up on all sides.
that's not what I'm trying to say here, but this is my point, that discourse online and discourse of its time has become divisive. It's why I've said before that the need for empathy in politics obviously goes both ways.
Yeah.
The need to stop stoking division goes both ways. But that, again, like I've said, like the difference is I've been able to reflect, I've been able to apologise, I've been able to realise this, and that, someone who wants to lead the country can't give that apology, cannot give that reflection, cannot say these same things. This is someone that wants to represent the same Jewish people that he's alleged to have bullied. This is someone that wants to represent the same people that he's constantly calling for the mass deportation of. This is someone that wants to represent the same people who he's saying he wants to revoke indefinite leave to remain for. So how can you, in your adult life, obviously years, decades removed from the things he said and mistakes he's made, not be able to take accountability or responsibility, and then claim to also want to, in good faith, represent these people as its prime minister?
Well, it's democracy, isn't it? People will decide whether they believe him on these issues or not.
Well, of course.
People of colour might support him because they're also worried about mass immigration to this country.
Well, sure,
Are
but
they
that's
racist?
that's not what I've said at all.
No. But what I'm saying is you're coming from a position, a little bit with Kirk, that because you don't agree with what he was saying, for instance, about civil rights, or indeed what he was saying about immigration, that you think, ergo, he is a racist. And some people will disagree with that analysis in the same way that they will disagree with the analysis that Nigel Farage's hard talk on policies relating to the same sorts of issues is inherently racist. But we probably need another podcast, frankly, to discuss that. It could be.
I mean, my point of, I guess, like I don't think Mr. Kirk is racist because I disagreed with him. I think Mr. Kirk holds racist views and therefore could be described as racist, and I think is racist if he holds racist views, in the same way that if the justification for the policies that Farage oftentimes advocates for is racist, if he is to have said these things, to have held these views about people, that is racist. And I don't think we should try and dance around that fact. The policy,
and you're free to say that. And I suppose the choice is: do we want to live in an empathetic world in which we cancel each other every time we offend each other, or do we want to live in a world in which we just accept that division is part of it, and we just man up and debate it and accept that we're going to anger each other? I do think one reason why you got cancelled in the way you did was because a lot of right-wing people felt that for a long time, if you said anything that the establishment deemed to be offensive, you could get cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
And this included going to jail for tweets. And then when they saw you say something which was objectively, and you admit, was objectively horrible, there are a lot of the right-wing people just wanted to cancel you because it was their one shot at getting someone cancelled.
Maybe.
And I think some of it was about balancing things out.
But can we also just say, I mean, in the context of things, by the way, I don't really believe in cancelling of anyone on the left or right. I also don't necessarily believe in people's WhatsApp messages being revealed to the public, despite the fact that if one got such a leak, if it was a politician, then yes, I think justifiable. People did get cancelled for literally saying things like, a man cannot have a cervix.
Precisely.
A woman
yes.
cannot have a penis.
That's my point. And then when someone on the left comes along saying that, like they're saying they're happy someone's been shot, it's understandable that the entire right, that the GB News would devote several weeks to saying, cancel him, because we wanted our scalp.
Well, possibly. But then there's a hypocrisy at the heart of that.
And there is a hypocrisy at the heart of that, which
I
is...
think I wrote a column about you, George, where I said, I don't know if it is appropriate for him to take on the leadership of this revered debating chamber, because I felt you had debased yourself somewhat, but people were calling for you to be thrown out of university.
Yes.
I sort of said, how does that help?
Yes, and you didn't want to not be the president of Oxford, right?
The Oxford Union.
Oxford Union, yeah. You tried to cling in there.
Well, cling in is, I think, the wrong word.
Right, but I mean, as you were not, you were going to apologise, but you were clearly not going to resign and give up that role.
Well, yeah, because I believed the Oxford Union is a student society, and university is a space to learn, to grow, to make a mistake, to improve from it. And in that same capacity, a student society is also the same place to learn, to grow, to make a mistake, and to improve from it. And in that capacity, I thought, well, I as a leader can make a mistake and be very frank about the fact that I made that mistake, and then learn and grow. And I thought that the Oxford Union is perhaps the perfect place to be able to engage with that. It's a debating chamber. It's all about being able to come up and say your mind and disagree with someone and have a safe space to do that. And so I thought, well, yes, I made this mistake, but also in my capacity as a leader, I can improve myself, and that I can do so and show that actually you can make a mistake and still be someone who's able to lead, be someone who's able to be reflective in their leadership, and someone who's able to be reflective and grow and improve yourself from that. And I thought, well, the Oxford Union is of course a space to do that, because it's a space where you're able to engage with different people and different ideas, and you're able to have that discussion.
Yeah.
And I think, it's interesting, you guys had a little discussion between yourselves about cancel culture. I've always been of the opinion that cancel culture is not productive on the left and the right. I think it's also been a discussion on the left and the right for a long period of time that cancel culture is not productive. That oftentimes cancelling someone only leads to entrenching them more in their views that you disagreed with in the first place. That, that kind of scrutiny to be put on someone is not productive at all. You talked about various different kind of comments being made and how people can be, I guess, cancelled for them. In that same capacity, the right also, especially in America, there were websites that were created and whole kind of machines put in place to not just cancel, but to go out of their way to disenfranchise, to get people fired, not just, for exposing some level of joy or celebration in what had happened, but even just for being critical of Mr. Kirk and critical of the things he said and the policies that he advocated for and the things he stood for. So obviously, I think absolutely there's been almost a hypocrisy in a sense, in that the right has very often, like you said, talked about cancelling and, why are we cancelling? And oh my God, like we can't say anything these days. And, on both sides, it's been called unproductive for years.
Yes.
It's recognized now as just an unproductive, method of, improvement. It's an unfruitful endeavor.
But to bring the conversation full circle, you said at the beginning, it wasn't about left or right, but it was really, because you would not have made the original comments. If somebody on the left had been shot dead, God forbid, you'd never have said, let's go, let's effing go. So in a way, ideology does come into this. Because if, God forbid, it was Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or somebody on the left that you agreed with, you would never have made that statement, George. That's the point.
I think perhaps, sure.
Definitely.
No, yeah, of course, sure,
Come
yes.
on.
No, yes, but I think this is like, I guess part of the learning process that I've gone through in that, like, I shouldn't just be looking at things on such a binary.
Yeah.
In that I shouldn't simply be so moralistic in that because I disagree with someone, on the political spectrum, that, it's good and bad, or, that I should be so black and white in the way I look at these things. And that's kind of something I guess I hope that like is something that I'm like learning about, and something
Hallelujah. We have a moment where a young person at Oxford appreciates the value of nuance. We have achieved something here today, folks.
I mean, yeah, it's something that, like, in this whole process, I've hopefully, like, in what limited space I've been given to talk, I've been trying to kind of get at is that there is a nuance to these things, and I'm learning that nuance, of course. And I think within that nuance, of course, we can then have that discussion that, these things are more complicated than simply left and right, and these things are more complicated than just,
Okay. But you haven't been given limited space to talk. You were president-elect of the Oxford Union and a member of the Oxford Union. Okay, you're at a prestigious university where you can have your... The point about Charlie Kirk and that moment with my son, regardless or not of whether my son agreed or disagreed with him,
Sure.
my son's reaction was, oh my God. Because there were many young people out there that won't get within 15 square miles of the Oxford Union ever in their lives. Ordinary people, ordinary school kids who have never taken parts in debates or moots or anything, who looked at that guy and just admired the fact that he started the conversation. And they felt that was lacking in their own lives. They felt that there wasn't the space for debate, not least if, God forbid, you happen to be a Gen Z or an Alpha who actually agreed with this bloke. That's the point. So you say you've got limited... You've had more opportunity than anybody equivalently to actually have your voice heard, not least because you obviously reacted to the story in the New Statesman and you're on here with us. So you haven't really been silenced.
Well, I'm not saying I've been silenced, but in that, the scope of criticism has been almost global.
Yeah.
And
that's horrible, I admit.
And it's been obviously difficult as a 20-year-old to adjust to that, to be able to speak to that. And I think, like you said, like I also had that same reaction upon seeing the video, upon seeing the severity of the situation. It's part of why I deleted, I retracted and apologized again before any of the news, because I realized, oh my God, like this is actually something huge. So like, of course, like that was part of my reaction. And I think like it's also part of why I was, separating, but part of why I was drawn to union is that space to have that debate, have that discussion. I grew up working class, I grew up, state comprehensive school. So I didn't really have the opportunity to engage in those spaces very often. I didn't have the space to, I guess, debate people in that capacity. So I thought, being part of the Oxford Union would give me that space. And I think it's interesting you talk about, Mr. Kirk being able to table ideas. Oftentimes debate, I think, is in this interesting space where it's considered almost a low-stakes environment in which you're allowed to talk about issues because the understanding is that everyone is working towards the same outcome of general improvement for all. And I think oftentimes then debate becomes a space that bad faith actors can use to Trojan horse certain ideas that aren't about the collective good of all, or aren't about collectively improving the situation for all, but are about improving situation of some at the detriment of others.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think this is a left-right issue, because I think, you can be on the left, you can be on the right, and still believe in, say, different streams of economic thought and different streams of social thought, but be accepting of all people, be accepting of all identities, and believe that, even through different methods, general improvement of all people and the general improvement of standard of living, say, for all people, is something desirable or something that you want to happen. So I think when you enter a debate space, you have this assumption that, yes, everyone is working towards that general improvement. But with bad faith actors, that's not always true. For example, if I was to debate a Tommy Robinson, for example, who
he has appeared at the Oxford Union.
He has appeared at the Oxford Union. If I was to debate, say, a Tommy Robinson, who held racist ideas, or I was to debate, say, for example, the person who on Jubilee debated Mehdi Hassan and declared himself a fascist, you allow people to enter this low-stakes environment where they're allowed to platform and table views that are inherently, let's say, racist in some capacity, or call into question the value of someone's identity, or call into question someone's personhood in a way that can, say, justify harm towards them because they devalue their personhood or devalue their value as a human being. And so you allow these people to enter that low-stakes environment and then have high-stakes impact. When you look at someone like, say, Charlie Kirk, who had, direct lines to the GOP, Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, Trump have all talked about having direct lines to Mr. Kirk. So we need to be very careful, I think, when we talk about debate in debate spaces, because it's not that they're just kind of this open space for forum and discussion, but these have impacts, and we need to be able to, I guess, protect the space to allow this low stakes engaging in the marketplace of ideas, while also being able to defend that from simply platforming ideas that will call into question someone's identity, someone's personhood, and justify potential harm towards them.
I see where you're coming from, but it's no longer Trojan horsing ideas into these debates. Nick Fuentes, who is uncancelable, has just been on Piers Morgan's show.
Yes.
Last count, 2 million people have watched it.
Yeah.
In which he will openly say that he admires Adolf Hitler.
Exactly.
But I have to say, George, one of the first things Fuentes will say when people criticize him is, look at reaction to the death of Charlie Kirk. And he will say people were celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. And to him, that's why he has every right to escalate his rhetoric. That's why his supporters have perhaps rallied to him, because of the perhaps mistaken feeling that there are two standards when it comes to right and left, and the left is able to say appalling things and get away with it.
We need to wrap it up.
We do, I'm sorry.
I'm going to have a concluding thought, which is that this podcast, and indeed the Union, proves that it is better to discuss these matters. The argument against yours would be to say, Tommy Robinson's just going to put it out there anyway, unchallenged with his own videos. Better he debate somebody like you to actually challenge what you perceive to be his warped ideas than just let him loose on an unsuspecting public.
I'd agree with that.
But George Abaraonye, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on the podcast today. It's been really interesting to speak to you.
No, thank you. I've enjoyed being able to have this discussion. I think it was almost fun, I guess, to have the back and forth.
Almost fun.
Almost fun.
It's,
almost
I tell you
fun.
what, it's